We have breaking news here. President Biden has announced he will stand down from the race. I'm going to read the statement here on my phone. We also have Tim Miller, who's going to be joining us shortly. My fellow Americans, over the past 3.5 years, we have made great progress as a nation. Today, America has the strongest economy in the world. We've made historic investments in rebuilding our nation, in lowering prescription drug costs for seniors, and in expanding affordable health care to a record number of Americans. We've provided critically needed care to 1 million veterans exposed to toxic substances. Passed the first, thank you so much, I'm just going to read off the paper here. Passed the first safety law in 30 years, appointed the first African-American woman to the Supreme Court, and passed the most significant climate legislation in the history of the world. America has never been better positioned to lead than we are today. I know none of this could have been done without you, the American people. Together, we overcame a once-in-a-century pandemic and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. We've protected and preserved our democracy, and we've revitalized and strengthened our alliances around the world. It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president, and while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. I will speak to the nation later this week in more detail about my decision. For now, let me express my deepest gratitude to all those who have worked so hard to see me reelected. I want to thank Vice President Kamala Harris for being an extraordinary partner in all this work, and let me express my heartfelt appreciation to the American people for the faith and trust you have placed in me. I believe today what I always have, that there is nothing America can't do when we do it together. We just have to remember we are the United States of America. Obviously, this is a significant breaking news development with the president announcing he is stepping back from the race. There was very little indication from people close to him and many people in the campaign that this was what was about to happen, as much as there were reports of Democrats calling on him to do that. What's interesting in this, I will note, and then we're going to bring Tim Miller in, is that he does not endorse the vice president in this statement. We'll see what he says later this week, and I know there's going to be a lot of reactions from people coming in as this statement was just put out by the White House. Tim Miller is back with me now. Tim, we were just talking just a few minutes ago, and I don't think either of us had any indication, and I'm always a believer you have to share with the public what you know and what you don't know. We knew there were lots of calls, but we had not been given any official indication, even as of 10 minutes ago, that this decision had been made. I even spoke with Keisha Lance Bottoms earlier this hour and asked her if she had an indication, and she's a senior advisor, and she had not. So what is your reaction to this news and kind of what's going to happen over the next couple of days?
Yeah. Well, first, I agreed with everything that was in the president's statement there. I think this was obviously very challenging for him. Some of us who've been agitating for this move, I think we're a little bit frustrated with the amount of time that it took just because of the stakes of this election and the desire to beat Donald Trump. But recognizing also that this is tough, that it is tough for, somebody in his position to recognize, to admit that maybe, while, he is up for the day-to-day rigors of the job of president, like the job of campaigning against Donald Trump is a different one altogether. And given what we saw at the debate and in the weeks since, that just didn't feel like he was up for that to the extent needed. And that was reflected in the polls, it was reflected in polls of Democrats, it was reflected in focus groups and in conversations that we all have with people in our lives. So I'm grateful to him that he came to that decision. I think the next steps kind of go to what we talked about in the hypothetical question in the last segment, right? Like what makes the most sense for the party? To me, I would reiterate, I do think an open process will probably lead to Vice President Harris. But, I think it would be good for the American people and for the Democrats to take this moment to get energized again, to get excited, to hear from the vice president, maybe hear from other people and about what a vision could look like, what a different contrast from Trump could look like. The last thing I'll say just on the vice president, to me, if you want to sum up a contrast, a prosecutor versus a convicted criminal, a woman who wants to protect your freedoms versus an old man that wants to take them away. Those are two really good kind of elevator messages that she could bring forward that were not that present and the ticket before today. So those are my initial thoughts.
No question about it. I know we're going to bring in Claire McCaskill, and I'm just going to say on a personal note, I'm just digesting this myself here because I worked for him for a year and a half, and he is a remarkable person, a remarkable president. He's had such a tremendous presidency where he has overcome the odds and defied people's expectations. People didn't think he could pass an infrastructure bill. They didn't think that he could lead through COVID. They didn't think he could pull countries together. He did all of those things and will continue to do those things, and also is just a deeply good human being. And I'm digesting this myself, so I just wanted to share that. We have Claire. I think we're getting Claire McCaskill on the phone as well. We'll get her, Claire. I just wanted to turn to you, Claire. I know you're digesting this too. So your thoughts on what this means, and of course, anything you want to reflect on. President Biden will continue to be president, obviously through January. There are questions now about what he will do, whether he will endorse Vice President Harris. Give us your thoughts and your immediate reaction.
Well, I still look at today with a heavy heart. I think people have been so caught up in the drama of the situation. I think the human side of this has gotten lost sometimes in the shuffle. And so I first and foremost want to say that I know how painful this has been for the president in so many different ways, and his family and his staff. And I am of who he is and how he has served. I think our country should be proud of who he is and how he has served. And I know that he will continue to serve us well throughout his entire term. And now the fact that he is willing to pass the torch speaks volumes about his priorities and how deeply he cares about this country. And frankly, the real danger that Donald Trump poses to our nation. Now what happens? I think everybody needs to keep in mind that Joe Biden chose Kamala Harris to be there in case he couldn't. When their ticket was voted for by 14 million people in the primaries, it was the assumption that it was Joe Biden, and if Joe Biden wasn't going to be there, it was going to be Kamala Harris. And so I am not dramatically opposed to an open process, but Kamala Harris is smart and strong and capable. She is more than qualified for the job. I think she will, frankly, surprise people in terms of her ability to connect with Americans at this moment. And I think she'll choose an amazing vice presidential candidate that will bring the ticket together in a way that will send the unifying message that we all so desperately want right now. So I'm kind of with Tim. I think if they do open it up, I have to believe Kamala Harris is by far the front runner. And I think she is the one under these circumstances that it makes the most sense to nominate for president for all the reasons I've stated and many more that we'll be talking about for days to come.
I just want to echo, Claire, I think we've seen her be a remarkably powerful campaigner, and she is such an effective prosecutor against Donald Trump, in the case against Donald Trump, but also on abortion rights, which is an issue that is on the minds of millions of Americans. I do think there are so many interesting questions here that will be discussed in the days ahead. We will all be discussing, including approaching ballot deadlines to get on the ballot. Some of those are in the early days of the Democratic convention. So this notion that there could be an on-the-floor fight just doesn't bear out in the realities of deadlines right now. The vice president could also take on all of the money and campaign operations, which is a huge organizational advantage. But I think there's also an interesting point raised by some that, it shouldn't look like a coronation, because if it's her, she should look strong. But these are all questions I know Democrats, the DNC, and others have been contingency planning on, but they're all going to play out very quickly in the days ahead.
Yeah, they will. And they will, and there's going to be a lot of input. But I think, Jen, as you and I both know, a lot of this work has been going on behind the scenes over the past few weeks. And I don't mean that anybody was, that knew that President Biden was going to do this today. I mean that when you're this close to an election, a lot of people work, well, what if? And those what ifs have been tackled in the past few weeks, and I think there's a lot of people out there ready now to execute plans.
Unquestionably. Claire, let me ask you, you know President Biden well. We're going to spend some time, as I think everybody should, over the next couple of months talking about his legacy. What do you hope people remember and talk about him in terms of his time as president?
You know, I think it's really important. We are so polarized in this country right now. I think it's really important to remember how effective he was at marshaling a team, first of all. I mean, he doesn't have anybody in his cabinet that wasn't endorsing him. He doesn't have a vice president that isn't going to be at his convention. He doesn't have, loads of people saying, oh, I wish it was someone else behind the scenes. It really is that he said he was going to bring people together and that he was going to restore dignity and normalcy to the Oval Office. And he was going to work in a bipartisan way. And if you look at the legislation, whether it's the first gun safety legislation passed in decades, whether it is the first infrastructure bill passed in decades, whether it is actually competing with the world in chip manufacturing, whether it is what he's done finally to score some victories in the pharmaceutical industry with bringing down the price of essential drugs like insulin to millions of Americans, especially seniors. He really got just a load done, and he did it with Republican votes, too. That is remarkable in this day and age. And I hope that's what he's remembered for, because I know that's what he's most proud of.
Well, we had some significant news, obviously, that just came out. The president has announced he is no longer going to seek the nomination. The Democratic Party was set to formally renominate the president at their convention, and he has made this announcement that he is going to drop out from the race. And the news, of course, comes just weeks before the Democratic Party was set to formally renominate him. We're going to end our coverage now, and we're going to pass the reins over to Katie Tur.